The following program is a production of Truth for the World.
I sought the Lord, and afterward I knew He moved my soul to seek Him, seeking me.
The greatest stories ever told are great because they are true. They are stories of love, hope, courage, and sacrifice. These are the stories of the Bible.
As we've been following a little boy and his father, we now find it early morning. The little boy wakes up early the next morning. His father's downstairs reading his Old Testament scriptures. In fact, he'd stayed up all night, curious, trying to read his scriptures so that he would find out how to tell his son who that was on the cross. The little boy, still curious about what he had just seen the day before, says, "Dad," and the father cringes. He knows what question is coming. Sure enough, his son rounds the corner of the kitchen. If the man hanging on that cross wasn't Solomon, who was it? The dad pretends not to hear him, intently looking at his Old Testament, so the son will see how busy he is. It doesn't work. First, he shifts on one foot and then the other. He clears his throat. He pulls up a chair at the table and glances over at his dad. "Dad, what you reading?" "Well, the book of Daniel." "Daniel? Was he a son of David?" No. "Oh, so it wasn't him on the cross, huh?" "No, it wasn't Daniel." "Yeah, but Dad, don't you remember the promise that God made to David? You know, about one of his children sitting on the throne and having a kingdom forever?" "Yes, of course." Finally, the father says, "Fine, son, let's talk about it. We left off last night with Solomon, right?" "Right." "Okay, well, not long after Solomon died, a man named Rehoboam took over as king. The people were tired of working so hard, and so they begged Rehoboam to make their burden lighter. But because of some bad advice that he got, Rehoboam said, 'No, in fact, I'm going to make your burden even more harsh.' And the people revolted and said, 'We refuse to follow you.' And so they chose a man named Jeroboam to be their leader. And they ran Rehoboam out of town. But the tribe of Judah still kept Solomon's son Rehoboam as their king. And 10 other tribes that kicked them out of Jerusalem wanted a man named Jeroboam to be their king. And so now this united kingdom that was under Saul and then was under David and also Solomon has now been divided. 12 tribes total. 10 of them followed Jeroboam, and 2 of them followed Rehoboam. So the father says to the boy, "The children of Israel continued to sin. The prophets came to tell them to stop sinning, but it just got worse and worse and worse, until one day our forefathers were taken captive by people called Babylonians." The boy says, "Yeah, I heard about them. They took us captive while Jehoiakim was the king, right?" "Yes, that's right. It was during the reign of Jehoiakim that the Babylonians came and took us captive." "So this isn't about the man on the cross?" Patience, son. You'll see. We'll learn about that man if we can figure it all out. But first, I must tell you about a man named Nebuchadnezzar. But before I tell you, I want you to remember the promise that God made to David all those years ago. 2 Samuel 7 verse 16, "And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee, and thy throne shall be established forever." Now, I want you to keep that promise always before you. As we turn to Daniel 1 to see what the Father has to say to His Son this morning. And so in Daniel chapter 1 verse 1, "In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it." So Nebuchadnezzar took Jerusalem, and now Israel is fallen into captivity. In verses 3 through 5, we see how that Nebuchadnezzar told the master of the eunuchs to go and find the most beautiful and healthy Israelites and bring them to him so that he could make them a part of his palace, so they could teach them the ways of the Chaldeans. We learn that the man went out and found some people. Among them were 4 men. And Daniel 1 verse 6 says, "Now among these were of the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And he changed their names to mean that which would fit a Chaldean kingdom. Daniel became Belteshazzar, and Hananiah became Shadrach, Mishael became Meshach, and Azariah became Abednego. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is their new names. So Nebuchadnezzar decided to feed them the best of the king's foods and to make them eat these Gentile delicacies. And so in Daniel 1 verse 8 it says, "But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself." And then Melzar, the one who was in charge of making the boys eat, told Daniel, "Please eat. If you don't eat, Nebuchadnezzar will have my head." But Daniel said, "I'll tell you what let's do. Let's do this. You feed your eunuchs all the king's delicacies, whatever the king decides for them, and just let me and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, let us eat what we have been told to eat by God. And after 10 days, let's just see who looks better." And so it is agreed. And Melzar took away the king's portion from the 4 boys. But verse 15 tells us that the 4 looked better than the rest of the others who had been eating the king's foods. Now here's the point. They trusted in God. They kept God's law, even though the king desired for them not to. And now look at God's reward for these 4 children, down in verse 17. "As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams." So the father says to the boy, "Now, I want you to remember that last part." And now look how chapter 1 ends. Verse 18. "At the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and all the astrologers in all of his realm. And so they were wiser and smarter. Nebuchadnezzar knew it." But as we come to the end of chapter 1, Nebuchadnezzar is no closer to obeying God. Nebuchadnezzar only acknowledges his Babylonian and Chaldean gods. And so we come to Daniel 2. A year goes by with the boys in the palace, and let's see what happens. Verse 1. "And in the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him." Now, remember a while ago, we said to remember verse 17. Well, here's why. Because of verse 2. "Then the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans for to show the king his dream. And so they came and stood before the king. Now the king tells them, 'I've had a terrible dream so that I could not sleep.' But he couldn't remember the dream. He wanted someone to tell him what the dream was and then to interpret the dream for him. So he calls all the astrologers, all of his psychics, you might say, and he says, 'Tell me the dream and then give me the interpretation.' They say unto him, 'Wait a minute, that's impossible. You tell us the dream and then we'll give you the interpretation.' But Nebuchadnezzar said, 'No, if you cannot do it, I will have you killed.' And they said, 'No, king, no one can do that.' Now the boy says, 'Well, wait a minute. All the wise men? Is that Daniel and Mishael and Hananiah and Azariah? They were wise men, weren't they?' 'Yes, indeed they were, son.' And so they go get the 4 men to destroy them, and Daniel says, 'What's going on?' So they tell him, and he says, 'Well, let me see if I can help.' Nebuchadnezzar goes out and tells him the dream. And so he prays to God to be able to do it. God gives Daniel the dream and tells him the interpretation of it. And in Daniel chapter 2 and verse 19 we read, "Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. And Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changeth the times and the seasons. He removes kings, sets up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding." And so Daniel makes sure that he gives God credit for having revealed this dream to him. And so Daniel is brought before Nebuchadnezzar, and down in verse 26 it says, "The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, he says, Art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen, and the interpretation thereof?" And Daniel answered in presence of the king and said, "The secret which the king hath demanded, cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers, can they not show that to the king? But there is a God in heaven, that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to King Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days." Now let's not breeze past that. Daniel is standing before the king who worshipped all of these false gods. Daniel says, all of your false prophets, all of your magicians who worship all of these other gods, they're not able to tell you the dream. But here's the key, Nebuchadnezzar. Here's the key. There's a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and thy visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. And so now he tells him what the dream is, and he gives the interpretation. He says in verse 31, "Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part iron and part clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and brake them into pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth." And this is the dream, and we'll tell you the interpretation thereof before the king. "Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, strength, and glory." In verse 38, "And wherever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all." And so he says, thou art the head of gold. So Nebuchadnezzar, you're the head of gold. But then look, verse 39, "After thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron. For as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of the potter's clay, part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of iron. For as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay." And then Daniel 2:42, "And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall partly be strong and partly broken. Whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay." But verse 44, "And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all of these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever." And now, we know from history that these kingdoms, we know exactly what they were. And sometimes you should go back and look closely at this dream. The Babylonian kingdom was the head of gold. The Medo-Persian Empire, run by Philip of Macedon, came and overthrew the Babylonians, and the Medo-Persians became the chest of iron. And then we have the Greeks under Alexander the Great. They were the third kingdom, the brass or the brazen kingdom. And then after that we have the Roman kingdom or the Roman Empire. At first the Romans were solid iron, but as time went on they were riddled from the inside. They had a strong military like iron, but they had a very weak government like clay. And so it would be that during this iron mixed with clay that a kingdom would be established which would last forever. Remember, there's going to be a king and a kingdom established forever. This verse tells us when it's going to come. It says in verse 44, "And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. The kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms and shall stand forever." In the days of these kings. Which kings? In the days of the Roman Empire. In the days of the Roman Empire, this rock, which was not cut out by man, only God could claim responsibility for the rock. And now look, this rock is going to break in pieces the rulers who were of iron and clay. The statue would fall down and break. It was during the days of the Roman kingdom that this other kingdom would be established. This kingdom would last forever. But now we see that the kingdom would not be left to people. It was not some earthly type of kingdom left to people to run. So now what do we see? First, that from David's own seed, from his lineage, there would be a king to sit upon a throne forever. Daniel shows us that the kingdom would be established in the days of the Roman Empire. But he also shows us that it was a kingdom that would not be left in man's hands to run it. And so Daniel is able to do what none of these other false wise men could do. He told the king his dream, and then he interpreted it for him. And the dream was about a kingdom that would come in the days of the Roman Empire, would last forever. So now the king was moved and recognized the power of Daniel's God. In verse 47, the king answered unto Daniel and said, "Of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods and a Lord of kings and a revealer of secrets, seeing that thou couldst reveal this secret." Now in the end of chapter 1, Nebuchadnezzar only recognized the Chaldean gods. But as we end chapter 2, we see that he at least acknowledges the one true God. He at least is a God. Oh, he doesn't give up his other gods, but at least at this point he does see that there is a God who is greater than other gods. So now more time goes by, and let's look at what happens in Daniel 3. Nebuchadnezzar sets up an image. He creates this giant statue, and he makes a command that all the people should bow down and worship this image. He says, "You bow down to this statue, or you're going to be thrown into the fire where you will be burned to death." Sure enough, the time came and they played the instruments, and the people fell down and worshiped the statue. But not everyone did. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they refused. They followed the one true God and would never bow to some idol. And so King Nebuchadnezzar says, "I will give you a chance to redeem yourself. We're going to play the music one more time, and this time you fall down and you worship, or I will throw you into the fire." Look what he says at the end of verse 15. "But if you worship not, you shall be cast the same hour into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands?" Oh, so the challenge is set. He says, "You worship this idol, or I'll throw you in, and there is no God who will deliver you from that." But look at how they answer in verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. It's no big deal for us." Look at verse 17. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up." They say, "Look here, Nebuchadnezzar, we respect you and everything, but our God will rescue us. But even if he doesn't, if he chooses to let us die in that fire, king, you better know this, even if we die in that fire, we will not bow down and worship that image." And that didn't make the king very happy. And so in verse 19, Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the form of his visage changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And he spoke and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was supposed to be heated. And so the fire was so hot that when the soldiers took them in to throw them in, the fire killed the soldiers. And they went over and looked inside. In verse 24 of Daniel 3, "Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished," or he was silent. "And he rose up in haste, and he spake, and he said to his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound in the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, no form, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." God had so protected his servants that a fire that was hot enough to kill the guards that were with them did not even singe a single hair on their heads, and they didn't even smell like smoke. And then in verse 28, Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies together, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Chapter 1, he acknowledged no God but his own gods. In chapter 2, he at least acknowledged that Daniel's God was a powerful God. In chapter 3, he comes to the conclusion that Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego's God is the most powerful God there is. And yet he was not willing to admit that he was the only God. And friend, that is what God wants. God says, I am the only one. You do not worship other things and me. He says, you only worship me. And now we come to chapter 4. Verse 1, Nebuchadnezzar, the king unto all the people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I thought it good to show the signs and wonders that the high God hath wrought toward me. And so he's telling this in retrospect. He says, I'm going to tell you about what happened to me. It would be my pleasure to tell you about it. And once again, he says, I had a dream. It was a great dream. Nebuchadnezzar had gone to bed in his palace that night, in his own words, contented and prosperous. His culture and achievements had lulled him into this false sense of security. His capital, Babylon, was a marvel of engineering with its new canals and waterways. He had erected magnificent buildings, laid out extensive parks. His city was one of the wonders of the world with its famous gardens. Nebuchadnezzar had become proud of his achievements. But he has this dream, and we'll read about his dream right now in chapter 4 and verse 10. Thus were the visions in mine head in my bed. I saw, behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and the height thereof was great. The tree grew and was strong, and the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the sight thereof to the end of all the earth. The leaves thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much. And it was meat for all. The beasts of the field had shadow under it. The fowls of the heaven dwelt in the boughs thereof, and all the flesh was fed of it. I saw in the vision of my head upon my bed, behold, a watcher. A holy one came down from heaven. He cried aloud, and thus hewed down the tree, and cut off his branches, shake off his leaves, and scattered his fruit. Let the beasts get away from under it, and the fowls from his branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass in the tender grass of the field. Let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from man's, and let the beast's heart be given to him, and let 7 times pass over him. And so he has this dream, and what does he do? He calls these people to come and interpret it, but they couldn't interpret it for him. Eventually, Daniel comes to the scene, and he hears Nebuchadnezzar's account of the vision of this great tree. It wasn't the tree that frightened him, it was the last part which troubled him, when it mentioned that the tree was going to be cut down to a stump. Worse still, the tree seemed to disappear from the vision, and a person took its place. The man in the vision would be kept in an open field in the same way that animals did. He'd be forced to dwell in the field just like an animal. So Daniel comes to interpret the dream in verse 19. Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonished for an hour, and his thoughts troubled him. The king spake and said, Belteshazzar, let not the dream or the interpretation trouble thee. Belteshazzar answered and said, My lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation thereof to thine enemies. Daniel is called to tell the dream, and Daniel says, I wish that this dream was about your enemies, but unfortunately it's not. This dream is about you. So Daniel says, Nebuchadnezzar, the tree is you. And just like a tree begins its growth from a seed, Nebuchadnezzar had built up a mighty empire which reached from the Mediterranean to Asia, the whole of the civilized world. It was quite an achievement. Just as a tree provides shelter and food, so Nebuchadnezzar was influential and powerful. But there was a downside as well. Instead of Nebuchadnezzar recognizing that it was God who raised him to his power, he took credit for himself. And in verse 22, it says, "It is thou, O king, that art grown and become strong, for thy greatness is grown and reached into heaven, thy dominion to the end of the earth." But the next verse says, "Whereas the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven, saying, Hew the tree down and destroy it, yet leave the stump of the roots thereof in the earth, even with the band of iron and brass in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beasts of the field, till 7 times pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king. That they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make thee to eat grass as oxen, and they shall wet thee with the dew of heaven. 7 times shall pass over thee until thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth to whomsoever he will." The king is going to be cut down from his lofty, proud position. He's to be deprived of his reason and driven from living with human beings to living as a beast in the field. He was going to lose his mind. He was to become like the beast in the field. Can you imagine? From being such a great king to becoming a brute animal. And it was to last for 7 times. That was the time it would take for Nebuchadnezzar to learn his lesson. And Daniel makes it clear the reason it was going to happen was that it was to teach Nebuchadnezzar that God who reigns and gives authority to whosoever he will. Daniel went on to explain the vision in more detail. Although judgment was to fall upon the king, his kingdom was not to be taken away permanently. The tree was to be cut down, but the stump with its root was to be left. There was some hope for the future, and the kingdom would be restored to Nebuchadnezzar when he acknowledged that heaven ruled. See, Daniel tried to get him to repent of his sins, to turn to righteousness. Like David, it was going to take a broken spirit and a broken, contrite heart, but it wasn't to be. And then it happened one day. Perhaps Nebuchadnezzar was taking a walk in his hanging gardens, congratulating himself on his great achievement. And the king spake and said, "Is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power, for the honor of my majesty?" With the words still on his lips, he was struck down and was made to be like an animal. And in fact, he was led out of the field and lived in the sad condition for 7 times. So we listen to the testimony of someone who had gained the whole world, all the riches that a person could possibly have, and he lost it. But in losing it, he was taught a powerful lesson. He lost everything in order to find God.
I sought the Lord, and afterward I knew He moved my...
If you would like to learn more about God's Word with a free Bible correspondence course, then write us at Truth for the World, P.O. Box 5048, Duluth, Georgia, 30096, the United States of America, or visit us online at TFTW.org. The preceding program was a production of Truth for the World, a work of the Duluth Church of Christ.